Today, you don't know when you wake up what was going to get disrupted. The question is, I think you can't plan for everything.
Yeah.
Can you at least be agile to start, thinking about it?
The future of geopolitics and energy is perhaps as murky as the future of AI. I think everybody has a sense of the direction of travel, but nobody knows when we're going to get there and how fast. I don't think anybody's able to do long-term planning in this environment. The fact that should I form a coalition of fossil fuel countries, should I double down on clean tech manufacturing? I don't even think that people are really being able to have time to process some of these issues and think through some of these.
Generation was very much shaped by the pandemic. And so they are aware of sort of their vulnerability in a way that I think was not true for older generations. It's great to be in conversation here in Davos at the ET House with some very respected business leaders from India and overseas. We're going to talk today about Agentic AI, geopolitics, and Gen Z talent, and how all of this is reshaping and rewiring the growth playbook that businesses have been used to. Romal, starting with you, what implications, how can Indian businesses stay ahead in this time of disruptions, especially by these three factors: geopolitics, Gen Z, and Agentic AI?
Yeah. I mean, geopolitics, of course, I think it's anybody's guess, because we always say that do scenario planning, look at various simulations. But today, you don't know when you wake up what was going to get disrupted. The question is, I think you can't plan for everything.
Yeah.
Can you at least be agile to start, thinking about it? I think agility is very important. Mm-hmm. The second part is, the Gen Z. Gen Z, what we've seen is probably are not as career-oriented today, but do have, of course, purpose as a significant thing. So how do you interest them to do incredible work, and therefore the ability to retain Gen Z? Agentic, I think, is clearly an area where, from an India perspective, where instead of what I call as redesigning processes, bringing in optimization efficiency, can we reimagine business models, right? Not create faster code, but create new products, create new IP. And I think that is what Agentic can really help us. We've got the brain power, right? We've got now the software and hardware integration as well happening. If we can crack that, then I think India would be okay.
Wonderful. Rohit, let me come to you now as a consumer company with millions of customers and, I don't know how many millions of transactions every single day. Can you talk us through the impact of Agentic AI and its capabilities today?
So look, I think overall, if you think of Gen AI, Agentic AI, it's always changing every 15 days, right? And so from a company standpoint, we have to be very clear on how we approach it. We do it in three parts. One area is clearly where it is getting increasingly proven that AI, especially Gen AI, is going to be just transformative, and it's already happening. And it's not just on cost of productivity. Actually, it's an experience where I think the impact is going to be quite substantial, right? Just to give you an example, if you're calling customer care and live, a Gen AI agent can spot how well the call went and immediately do corrective action. That's a much superior customer experience. It, of course, leads to better productivity as well. So that's one area. The second is where there is enough traction and we must have the foot in the door and do it, right? Things like video, marketing, branding, social, right? Social handles completely run on Gen AI are already a reality. We have that today, right? The last thing, the cultural level, top 500 leaders of the company, next appraisal cycle, will have to stand up and answer what they did with AI, right? Without exception, whether it's the legal person or the salesperson, it's not limited to tech, limited to product, limited to people who are presumed to be more central office in nature. Even a regional handle, I'd say that how did she use Gen AI in her day-to-day work?
On geopolitics, Sumant, I want to come to you. Yours is a business that for the longest time had a lot of narrative support in terms of the global discourse on climate change, the importance of renewable energy, the importance of clean energy in powering all of our endeavors. That narrative has suddenly shifted in a rather dramatic manner and in a way that maybe nobody could have predicted. What does a business like yours, do in a scenario like this?
Yeah, isn't it quite remarkable how things change? And that's the fun, I think, of running businesses like ours, or even what they were talking about, where the change is even more dramatic. I think the reality is that if you think of clean energy as just another sector, the climate change imperative was what got us started, what got us over the threshold of critical mass. And I think now we actually are at a point where, of course, policy support would help us even more. But even if it's not there, there are strong enough commercial reasons for us to carry on and for most countries to carry on driving renewable energy. So even if people don't talk about it as much, and I was just going through a presentation that talked about, for example, in the speech of a well-known business leader who writes a lot, how many times did climate change occur? And there's a peak in 21, 22, and tailed off entirely in the last 1 or 2 years. Okay, and I think that's emblematic of what's happening. Dialogue around climate change definitely.
So when there is discourse, then a lot of people believe there is climate change happening, and when the discourse is down, is that the point you're trying to?
No, I'm trying to make the point that people, to just reinforcing the point that you made, which is that people are not talking about it as much. But the only point I'm making is that it doesn't matter as much any longer because we are now on our own sort of steam moving forward. The other point I'd like to make is that in this change that has happened in recent months, there are two kinds of states that are emerging very clearly. There are those states that are what you might call the petro states. They are all fossil fuel based. Those are the ones that are with alacrity sort of moving away. And obviously the largest of them all is the US, which is moving fastest. But it is also giving cover for a lot of the other petro states to also do less. But there are a lot of other electro states like India and China, right? Europe, which don't have a lot of fossil fuels. For us, we don't have a choice. We have to double down on clean energy. And that is really what you're seeing. And you're seeing the divide between the petro states and the electro states as far as clean energy is concerned is going to keep widening as we go forward. And the big question mark today, Sruthijith, is who's going to win the battle for energy? Right? Which path are we going to take eventually? My sense is, just given how technology is moving, it is going to eventually be the electro states that are going to win out. But maybe I have a selfish interest. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying, perhaps. But I think that's what's going to happen.
No, so Sumant, give us an insider's view on what's happening in the industry. I mean, Trump turning so decisively against climate change, has it had an impact on your industry globally? Or like you're saying, because it had already reached a certain threshold of business competitiveness, has it gone far too along for it to make a difference?
I think it has gone far, quite far, and Trump's pulling out of the US out of all the COP agreements and so on, that is well known. But if you look at it, COP 30 in Belém that met, I think all the countries further reiterated every single other country of the world was there. And there was a reiteration of the fact that climate change is important, clean energy is the solution, electrification is required. So the rest of the world is carrying on, right? And as I said, within those, there are some which are more convinced about it and are doubling down and some that are less. But certainly the rest of the world is carrying on. So I think as far as our business is concerned, there's not really been any fundamental shift. We are continue to invest. The targets that India has set continue to be there. And that will carry on, I think. I don't see really any change happening.
Great. David, let me come to you now. I want to understand what parts of business, is it strategy, operations, customer engagement, or talent attraction and retention? What parts of business are today getting most disrupted by AI?
Well, I think in terms of AI, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, I think so far the business cases, and I'm curious, what do you think about this as well, seem to be quite strong on some of the routinized sort of back office tasks, writing copy for your website, supporting your legal team in terms of contracts and so on.
But I think we're beginning to see some really, really exciting value propositions vis-a-vis customers. You mentioned a couple of them already. And so, the challenge for a lot of leaders is to figure out exactly how do we create that environment in which folks can experiment and can learn. How do we adopt quickly emerging best practices? Again, as I said, so far, you see efficiency drivers in some of the more routinized tasks, but it's exciting, the experimentation vis-a-vis value propositions to customers.
Right. Talal, let me come to you now. On the matter of Gen AI and geopolitics, I think two Gs, and the third G, which is G42, fits rather nicely. One of the things that interests me about your firm is that you've emerged as a strong player in AI while being based out of a geography that is not a conventional superpower in this area. So how has your company managed to do that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think that's it's interesting to see how the UAE continuously has punched above its weight on multiple different domains and had the foresight of building things like in the energy industry, even early on in 2010, began to build nuclear reactors to try to diversify our energy basket that could end up supporting the growth that we had without even in the line of sight being something called AI. And then fast forward 2017, an AI minister, the first in the world. So there's been this open lab environment / vision with the leadership that have had the foresight to act very early on and situate us in a way that can continuously capitalize on the comparative and competitive advantages that the UAE has built. And so I think what we found in the last 3 years is that we were somewhat well-positioned to embrace and ensure the adoption of a new technology, not be scared of the technology, but really lean in. And this has happened across multiple different layers in society, and that's why we call it AI native societies, which we are enabling, that is always underpinned by a digital infrastructure that then requires, if you follow it to the root, energy.
Right.
And so when you look at the recent Microsoft report on AI diffusion, and you see that the UAE is number 1 in the world, not number 2, not number 3, number 1 in the world in adoption of AI, there's a long history to how we got to that point. And it's not just technology or capital, it's also culturally instilled within us to adopt new technologies. I remember for the longest time, there were 200% mobile penetration rates, right? So these are the types of things where people have embraced technology early on and always look for tools to continue to enable productivity. And so G42 fits nicely there because as it started initially more on the big data analytics and business intelligence and trying to create insights, it quickly started to evolve in that time frame to embrace some of the cutting edge technologies and deploy the cutting edge infrastructure that is important in terms of underpinning what it would take to have a general purpose technology infuse every facet of life.
Well, what you're saying is really interesting to me because this is a big question for us in India as well, right? Like how do we engender an ecosystem for innovation? I mean, India has a great startup ecosystem. I mean, Rohit's company is a testament in many ways to, how we can build a $10 billion company, especially on consumer internet, etc. But when I look at UAE, I see a geography that has managed to attract and is a kind of lightning rod for talent from the region and beyond in areas like crypto, in areas like every kind of gaming. So AI, which kind of came late in that wave, is kind of at the end of that continuum. And so therefore, did it help that you already had a culture of welcoming disruptors, people who are working on whatever is the cutting edge technologies? I'm, for instance, told that you can buy an apartment using crypto in UAE. Yeah. So is that continuous embrace of disruption, did that help?
It absolutely did. It did. And I think, again, it comes down to the mindset, right, of individuals that are willing to take calculated risks, lean in, and try to embrace a technology and benefit from the value that it brings to them on a personal and a professional level. And then you have the government adopting it. So things like the example you mentioned, obviously this wouldn't be possible without the regulatory framework in place to allow it to happen, both regulatory on cryptocurrency, but then also regulatory in terms of the real estate environment allowing for that. And then there's the banking and financial services component. So the interesting thing about the way that the UAE works is that you have that synchronicity between the different components that create the ability for you to take advantage of these types of technologies. It would be a futile effort to try to do this if these things were siloed.
And Talal, one of the fears that many countries around the world, like India, when you look at this wave of AI sweeping through the world, disrupting entire industries, one of the concerns is, it needs a tremendous amount of capital if you're getting into the business of models, or infrastructure is insanely expensive. So you either have to be, you have a structural disadvantage if you're neither the United States nor China as of today. Is that something to be concerned about, or like G42 has done, go forth and, try, give it a shot nevertheless?
So look, I think it's important to recognize that when you're in a business that is underpinned by this type of digital infrastructure that is extremely capex intensive. Just to give you a frame of reference, a 1 gigawatt AI data center, if you count power generation, the liquid cooling, the chips themselves, which is about 80% of the cost, network gear, and then the shell and core of a data center, not only takes 18 to 24 months to build, because you can't defy the laws of physics. Concrete takes a certain amount of time to dry, and we can accelerate that. We've done this in the past. But it also is
making concrete dry faster.
Well, no, we're building as fast as we can. Someone told me the other day that a woman can't have a 9 women can't have a baby in a month.
That's right, exactly.
So that stuck with me, because when we're thinking about trying to accelerate things in terms of time to value, there's only so much you can do. But what's more important is that the capex required is about $50 billion a gigawatt for an AI data center. And if you think globally, you do need around 100 to 500 gigawatts of AI data center to diffuse in an equitable fashion and ensure equitable access to intelligence. Now, the silver lining here is, number one, you can get many capital allocators together like we're doing to invest in that. But number two, you don't need to have a data center in every single country to power AI.
Right.
And that's where, as opposed to with electricity where you have substations everywhere, you could actually serve AI from other countries where you have concentrated power and infrastructure. So in our days, with a 5 gigawatt UAE AI campus that we've built, we are now able to diffuse intelligence and make it exportable. These tokens that we manufacture in the UAE, in this AI factory that we're building, is something that we could then package in the form of agents and export to around 3,200 kilometer radius at sub 60 milliseconds. So half the world's population roughly within that vicinity. And that's where I think you don't have to have the capex in every single one of those countries to do what we're trying to do in the UAE.
Right. Thank you for those very insightful comments. Romal, let me come to you now. You've had a stellar career as a consultant, and what I'm keen to know is, has there ever been a phase before where you're dealing with the technology and you're trying to advise clients on a technology that itself is changing so rapidly? It's almost like every second week we are seeing some advancement, some exciting announcements, some crazy excitement in some particular niche around something somebody has released. How do you, as a consultant, advise clients on a technology that itself is like changing so fast?
Yeah. First in terms of consulting, most people have predicted the demise of consulting as well.
I know.
It's quite nice.
They continue to.
They hear it. But, in our own case, for example, the way we're looking at it is changing the business models. To give you an example, we never serve the MSME market, right? We normally serve only the big clients as such. But with AI and Gen AI, I can today create platforms and provide services to them, because 70 to 80% can be machine and just 10-20% can be human, and it can be profitable as well, right? So we ourselves are changing our own business models. Now, coming to clients, I think the important thing is, are you trying to solve a technology problem, or are you trying to solve a business problem and a significant business problem?
Yeah.
If that is there, right, you will still keep having newer and newer versions, but that doesn't mean you continue with what you have, right? And you should be flexible to change. But largely, if you're trying to solve a business problem and you be very clear what you're trying to solve, I think then that's a little bit more easier. But if you're distracted consistently by every shiny toy that comes in, I think that's going to lead to a lot of problems. And you can do two or three things, right? You can still optimize a lot of things that you do, which I think is important. But like I said, as India, because we've always written code for everybody in the world. But now, not just writing code, can we just build better products? Can we invest a little bit more in R&D? We don't invest in R&D, and right, in IP. We don't do it enough. So I think that's the shift also that needs to move, right? And if you take pharma companies, for example, you can do drug discovery much faster now. But of course, if it can be supported by regulation, which allows you to do clinical trials as well, in addition to this, then you will be much more faster as well. So you've got to also have a government enabling certain regulations as well.
Sumant, let me come back to you now on because geopolitics and energy are really some of the biggest themes in Davos always. And I think the points you made about the petro states and electro states is, I think, really, really relevant and front and center today than it has been, at least in a few decades. And certainly at least since Saudi Arabia agreed to denominate the sale of oil in dollars, and that, as we've been hearing a lot recently, that made a big difference. How do you foresee geopolitics shaping up from here in the context of energy? Do you see a broad coalition of petrostates on the one side and electrostates, as you call them, on the other side, emerging, at least tactically and opportunistically?
I think the future of geopolitics and energy is perhaps as murky as the future of AI, or uncertain as the future of AI is right now. I think everybody has a sense of the direction of travel, but nobody knows when we're going to get there and how fast. And you could also end up in a totally different place. I think right now what's happening is geopolitics has become extremely, extremely volatile and uncertain. And so everybody's reacting on a daily basis to new things that are coming their way. I don't think anybody's able to do long-term planning in this environment, frankly speaking. So to think about the fact that should I form a coalition of fossil fuel countries, should I double down on clean tech manufacturing? I don't even think that people are really being able to have time to process some of these issues and think through some of these. I think unless things settle down, it's very hard for people to really make policy and start determining strategy. I think people have a general sense of where they want to go, but I think that everything is just moving too rapidly to be able to figure out how.
Nevertheless, what's your personal? I'm not going to let you take the easy way out saying this is all too complex, nobody can see it. The question is, what is your personal prediction?
My personal prediction is you tell me what's going to happen to Greenland first. Okay, whether NATO survives, what the European Union does to protect itself against, on the one side, Russia, and perhaps on the other side, So I think all of those things are unknowns at this point in time. And perhaps Davos actually is coming at a very interesting point in time where some of these things might become better known in the course of next 1 week. And, we may have a clarity after that. But at this point, it's just too uncertain to figure out what's going to happen. I think that, look, if I look at it, India is sort of carrying forward on its own path. It's not changing. And that's good. We have, therefore, at least some stability. We've taken the 50% tariff hit on the chin, and our economy is still doing well. I think we're showing, and of course, China has also shown that you can sort of carry on in a certain way. And that's what I think Europe needs to do as well, perhaps.
Right. For my last question for this panel, let me come to you, David. We have not, I think, spoken enough about Gen Z. You probably work, at least on this panel, among the folks on this panel, the closest with young people. Give us a sense of what is their worldview like today? How are they looking at the rise of AI? I know a lot of young people are very concerned about the employment prospects and what it's doing to the jobs market, but also geopolitics. I mean, give us a sense of what their worldview is like right now.
Look, we know that every generation's values are very much shaped by their formative years, late teenage, early 20s, and so on. So think about what that has been like for Gen Z, right? So this is a generation that not only grew up with the internet surrounding them, but social media, right? So they grew up in a world in which they learned early on, often in middle school curricula already, to distinguish fact from fiction. They are skeptical of information that they see. They're critical consumers of information. And that includes, by the way, pronouncements from CEOs and from leaders. They hear something and their instinct is, I don't know if that's true. Show me the evidence, right? Of course, that generation was very much shaped by the pandemic. And so they are aware of sort of their vulnerability in a way that I think was not true for older generations. And so it is a purposeful generation. In that respect, they're similar to millennials. But I think unlike millennials, they are much more skeptical. And so they want to see real evidence. Don't just tell me that working at Deloitte is a great way of earning a living and making a difference. Show me the evidence. What are you really doing? Are you really transforming people's lives at G42? And, companies that demonstrate this, I think, have an incredible ability to attract what also happens to be the best educated generation to ever enter the workforce. So they'll be holding leaders' feet to the fire for some years to come, and I think it's going to be a good thing.
Wonderful. With that, we'll come to the close of this insightful discussion at the ET House here in Davos. We heard from Sumant about how renewable energy and clean energy technologies might have gone far too ahead to be, too disrupted by changing political narratives. We heard from Romal about how enterprises are transforming themselves with AI and how consultants are still in the game. That is whom they are turning to for advice on all the big questions on AI. We heard from David on how it's important for executives to educate themselves on AI. We heard from him about how how Gen Z wants evidence before they'll believe any of your axioms around any of these broad themes. And we most importantly heard from Talal about the importance of building an ecosystem that engenders and encourages innovation. And that's how you get into AI, and that's how you become a powerhouse in AI. Important themes with lessons for India as well. With that, we'll close the session. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for your time.